In the volatile heart of the Middle East, the conflict between Israel and Iran has reached a dangerous new phase. For decades, tensions simmered, defined by proxy wars, shadow operations, and fierce rhetoric. But now, many fear that the region stands on the brink of a catastrophic direct confrontation. With Israel's recent airstrikes deep into Iranian territory and reports of Iran moving closer to nuclear capability, the question is no longer if the two nations will collide directly, but how bad it could get. This video explores the worst-case scenario, a full-blown war between Israel and Iran, and what it could mean for the region, the world, and especially the United States. To understand the gravity of the current moment, we have to rewind. Israel and Iran weren't always enemies. In fact, prior to Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution, the two countries had strong ties. But after the revolution, Iran's new regime adopted an aggressively anti-Israel stance, calling for the destruction of the Israeli state. Since then, Iran has supported groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, both sworn enemies of Israel. On the other hand, Israel has carried out dozens of covert and overt strikes against Iranian forces and facilities, especially in Syria. The shadow war has been brutal, but largely kept below the threshold of direct warrant till now. In recent months, however, everything changed. Israel, citing intelligence from the International Atomic Energy Agency, claimed that Iran was enriching uranium at levels dangerously close to weapons-grade enough, potentially for multiple nuclear bombs. Then came the bold and controversial operation. Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a sweeping aerial campaign deep into Iranian territory, reportedly targeting nuclear sites near Natanz, Arak, and Fordo, as well as major military command centers. Iran responded with waves of missile and drone attacks. And though Israel's air defense systems intercepted most of them, the exchange marked a turning point, the first time both countries publicly acknowledged direct military strikes against each other's homeland. So what does the worst-case scenario look like? First and foremost, it could spiral into a multi-front war. Iran has significant regional influence. Its allies Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and Palestinian factions in Gaza could all be activated. Imagine missiles raining down on Israel from multiple directions, overwhelming its Iron Dome and David's Sling defense systems. In return, Israel could strike back with overwhelming force, especially in southern Lebanon and Gaza, triggering massive casualties and displacement. Already densely populated areas could be turned into rubble within days. But the conflict might not stay confined to the Middle East. A war between Israel and Iran could quickly draw on global powers, especially the United States. As Israel's closest ally, the U.S. has a long-standing commitment to its security. If Iran strikes American bases in Iraq, Syria, or the Persian Gulf or attempts to block oil shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. could be pulled in militarily. In fact, many analysts believe that a wider war could mirror the early days of the Iraq invasion, but potentially far bloodier and more unpredictable. American warships could engage with Iranian forces in the Persian Gulf. U.S. aircraft could support Israeli bombing raids. American citizens, both in the region and at home, could become targets of retaliation. Economically, the fallout could be massive. The Strait of Hormuz, through which nearly one-fifth of the world's oil supply flows, would be at immediate risk. If Iran blocks or mines the strait, global oil prices could skyrocket. That would mean higher gas prices in the U.S., supply chain disruptions, and inflation spikes. Markets around the world would reel. The global economy, already recovering from years of instability, might plunge into a recession. And then there's the nuclear question, the darkest part of the worst-case scenario. If Iran perceives an existential threat from Israel, it may accelerate efforts to build a nuclear bomb. Conversely, if Israel believes that Iran is days or even hours away from completing a nuclear weapon, it might resort to using its own undeclared but widely assumed nuclear arsenal to stop them. This kind of preemptive nuclear strike would break a taboo that has held since World War II, opening a terrifying new chapter in modern warfare. Civilians would suffer the most. In Tehran, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Qom, millions of lives could be upended. Hospitals would be overwhelmed. Infrastructure destroyed. And both nations, despite their advanced military capabilities, would see extensive civilian casualties. Refugee flows would spike. Humanitarian aid would struggle to keep up. Social media would flood with images of burned-out buildings, crying children, and chaos fueling global outrage and division. On the diplomatic front, the world would be divided. Some nations would back Israel, citing its right to self-defense. Others would condemn the escalation and push for sanctions or emergency peace talks. The United Nations would likely call for a ceasefire, but with little power to enforce it. China and Russia might exploit the chaos to expand their influence in the region or to pressure the U.S. elsewhere. In the worst-case scenario, global alliances could shift. NATO could be tested. And the idea of a unified global response to crises like climate change or future pandemics could take a back seat to rising military tensions. There's also the cyber front, a growing dimension of modern warfare. Both Israel and Iran possess advanced cyber capabilities. A full-blown cyber war could cripple financial systems, energy grids, airports, and water supplies not just in the region, but across the globe. Imagine power blackouts in European cities, ransomware attacks on U.S. hospitals, all traced back to a Middle East conflict. And let's not forget the psychological impact. The world has already endured war fatigue after years of conflict in Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Syria. Another major war, especially one involving nuclear risks, could lead to widespread fear, misinformation, and political polarization. In the U.S., debates would rage over military involvement, foreign aid, and refugee resettlement. The 2024 presidential race could be dominated by foreign policy crises. Social media would amplify every rumor, every image, every speech, fueling anxiety, hate, and misinformation. Of course, all of this remains a scenario, a worst-case projection. It's not inevitable. Diplomacy, bilateral negotiations, and pressure from global powers could still pull the two sides back from the brink. There's always a chance for de-escalation, but the ingredients for disaster are all there. Long-standing hatred, powerful weapons, regional alliances, and nationalist pride. It's a combustible mix. The history has shown that once wars like this start, they rarely stay limited. For the United States and its allies, the challenge is clear. Avoid direct entanglement while preventing a humanitarian catastrophe. Support Israel's security without fueling broader escalation. Use diplomacy while preparing for military contingencies. It's a tightrope and the world is watching. In the end, the question we must ask isn't just what is the worst-case scenario, but what are we doing to prevent it? Because once war breaks out at this scale, nobody truly wins. Only survivors remain scarred, grieving, and wondering how it all went so wrong.